will give a really brief introduction, but then I want each one of our panelists to kind of introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about the company and the role they play in the company. Then we're going to dive into some discussion about what's going on in supply chain. And I would also, as I look around, I see we have some distributors out here, we have some manufacturers, and we have some retailers. Let's make this an interactive discussion. If you have questions, if you want to say, when am I going to get my whatever? That's okay. Let's ask that, and well, let's let's be polite. But feel free to ask questions, and we can engage in a dialogue. So first up, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Charlotte Mustard is the director of marketing with Sashco Sealants, and she's the diagonal line from her picture. And in the middle, we have Paul Green, who's the chief merchandising and procurement officer with a little company called True Value that you may have heard of. And then last but not least, to my immediate left, we have Jeff Lynch, who's the president of Lancaster. So we have two members really from that distribution level and one member that is representing the manufacturing level. Charlotte, why don't you go ahead and just give us a little bit about Sashco and what you do at Sashco?
So Sashco is a manufacturer of high-performance sealants. We sell to hardware stores, we sell to lumber yards, building materials, all of that. And so we're dealing with supply chain shortages every day from the raw material side and then passing that off to the distributor side. And the way Sashco manages that is we have a leadership team. So I sit on the same table with people from the head of each function, and it is an all-hands-on-deck endeavor to try to figure out what we're going to do from marketing to sourcing.
And there's hardly an area of the business it doesn't impact.
That is correct.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you, Charlotte. Welcome to the panel. Paul?
Hey, nice to be here, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, Dan. So I'm with True Value. As Dan mentioned, I run our merchandising and inventory or supply chain functions at the company. You may or may not be all that familiar with True Value. I think a lot of people associate with them with the retail side of the business. The company really is fashioned more like a wholesaler or a distributor. A lot of what we do is about supporting independent hardware store owners and in some cases paint store owners. And as Charlotte said, we've been at the center of the storm with this. A lot of the products that we sell are either imported directly or they have import parts. So a lot in the popular press about all the congestion with ocean freight. That has been a really profound impact on our business. And then we were just talking a minute ago about a lot of the natural disasters that have been going on around the country. Paint is a big component of what we do, and it's just been one natural disaster after another, right? So ice storms in Texas, we had hurricanes in Ida, or in Louisiana with Hurricane Ida, and that's had just a really pronounced effect on our ability to get product. And it's been a big focus, not only of supply chain, but of the company in total.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the panel, Paul. Jeff?
Yeah, first of all, great to be here. Again, as you said, my name is Jeff Lynch. I'm a president of Lancaster. If you're not familiar with Lancaster, we're a nationwide wholesaler of paint sundry products. Usually when I say that at a cocktail party, they look at me like I got three eyeballs. So paint sundries is anything you'd find in a paint store but the paint. And we service about 13,000 customers across the U.S., into Central America and also in Canada. And I really was excited to be a part of this panel because as a distributor, we don't manufacture the product, and we're not a retailer, so we don't control what goes on the shelf. We really have a unique perspective as far as some of the supply chain issues. And I would say as the president right now, my role is pretty much taking your calls on where your product's at, but hopefully that'll change.
Now your customer service rep too, yeah, all right. Well, Jeff, why don't you start us off I'd like to hear from you guys just kind of characterizing what we have been through with the supply chain over the last 18 months. I mean, we hear so much, and every week it seems, Paul, you were just saying, it it's an overused term to say kind of a perfect storm, but in a lot of ways it has been a perfect storm, and different things keep rolling in. I mean, it seems like we had thunder and lightning and rain and floods. Now the locusts are coming right behind it. Jeff, why don't you just kind of characterize from your perspective, what's happened with the supply chain over the last 18 months?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about this is, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues, but I really see, 2021 is quite a bit different year than 2020. I mean, in 2020, we knew the pandemic was starting, businesses were shutting down. Raise your hand if you went to the office and said, we have no idea what we're supposed to be, this direction we're supposed to be heading in the months to come. So I think we're all in that boat. We started scaling back. If I had a crystal ball, I would have done just the opposite and put my foot on the gas. And then once the holidays, Memorial Day rolled around, we were off to the races. Demand started shooting up and so forth. Being in the paint channel, what makes 2021 different is, as Paul had mentioned, the ice storm in Texas, the resin plant explosion in Ohio, in the paint channel, that really disrupted a lot of product. So unlike 2020, when we couldn't get people coming back, we couldn't get ramped up to produce, in 2020, what a lot of our vendors are telling us is, we got people back, we've made investments to get product out, now we're just waiting for a component or a raw material. I think the other thing that makes it interesting too is, despite all of this, a lot of people in this room, retail, we're having very good years. The demand is extraordinary. And, I always say, our reps will call us up and go, how come we don't have this product? And, we tell them, we say, you do realize that you have sold more of that product this year than you have any other year. So, we're looking at this thing as a supply chain issue, which it definitely is, but the silver lining in that is a lot of it is due to the incredible demand, if you will. But I do see I always thought 2020 couldn't get any crazier, and then 2021 comes along.
Well, and then we'll talk in a little bit here about what the future might hold, but that's a good setting the stage for where we are. Paul, how are you guys seeing it? Is it kind of echoing what Jeff says? Or?
I think Jeff hit a lot of the high notes. You talked a little bit about this at the HCA conference, right? So the silver lining in all this is just the extreme demand. The downside of it is, the numbers were great. They would have been even bigger if we'd have been able to meet demand. And when I look at this problem, I think there's certainly a supply chain component, but there's a demand component as well that you need to appreciate. When I look at what's happened in our business over the last year and a half, just put yourself back in your shoes 18 months ago. We all had a sort of a newfound love for masks and sanitizers and wipes, and I felt so sympathetic towards companies like Beckett, Renkaiser that were trying to produce wipes, and really what it speaks to is changes in consumer preferences and changes in consumer behavior. We thought that was going to be short-term and localized, and then it started to spill over into lawn and garden, right? So everybody got tired of working from home. They moved, outside. They wanted to spend more time outside, and lo and behold, lawn and garden purchases started to shoot up. So, contending with that was a big issue. And then I think the other phenomenon, on the demand side, that has been a challenge for our business is, I guess an economist would talk about it as sort of a bank run, right? So everybody looking to get their money out. We've seen this with some of our customers. When we finally get product on the shelf, there's a run on the stock, right? And so trying to understand where we're going to see those spikes in demand has been a real challenge. In some cases, we've had to put limits on. You see those when you go out to a grocery store. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, they had limits on toilet paper.
Oh, right.
So that's applying to our industry as well. And then on the supply side, for me, I think there's two big things, right? And I've heard this from customers, and kind of makes me scratch my head. They'll say, "Yeah, but COVID is largely over. Yeah, we gotta wear masks, but people are back to work in the States," and that's true. But I think the thing that people don't appreciate is COVID is affecting the whole world, in some cases far more profoundly than it is the United States. And so you're seeing port closures, you're seeing production shutdowns overseas. And again, a lot of what we sell, a lot of that is sourced overseas. So that's a piece of it. And then I think, you know, the economist in me would look at what's happened with globalization. You know, you have consumers on one side of the world and producers on the other, and then you've got this fragile network of just-in-time supply chain that's of connecting the two, and any one link in that chain is disrupted, the whole thing is just shaken. So those are, I guess, in broad strokes, my perspective on it.
Well, let me ask you this real quick, because you brought it up, this concept of just-in-time management. I mean, we all read the books over the last 10 years, 15 years about just-in-time supply chain management. And is that done? Is that over? I mean, because now, you know, this concept of well, we can stock so many here, and we know what our needs are, and we can replenish as we know our needs, and then a lot of that was built around the ready ability to replenish whenever you want, taking for granted that, to use your example, there will always be toilet paper on the grocery store shelves when I need it. Hopefully not when I need it, but when you want to replenish it. But is just in time like kind of a concept that's seen its time come and go? No problem.
I don't see it going away, but what I do see is production moving closer to consumption, right? So that's maybe an abstract way of saying the reshoring or onshoring movement that it's been taking place the last 10 years or so. I think that's going to accelerate. You know, I look at the goods that we sell. There are low margin goods, and then there are higher margin goods. Those higher margin goods, I think, are going to be the areas where you're going to start to see domestic manufacturers get smarter about automation and productivity improvements and bringing some of that back to the States. The notion of just in time, I think will persist. In the short term, with import shipments, what it's going to mean is just more cost, right? So you can't rely on it. That means you need to put more on the shelf because of the unreliability of the inbound supply, and that's going to unfortunately push prices, which we could get into that if you'd like, but that's going to push prices even higher.
All right, we'll save that thought. We'll come back to it. Charlotte, you guys are in a little bit different position in the manufacturing community. And I remember it was not too long ago, we had the fortune of coming out to your facility and touring. And I remember one of the things your team was telling us was, you know, we had all the chemicals we needed, if I might be getting this right, we had all the chemicals we needed to make our product, but we couldn't get at one point, we could not get the tubes that we put them in. So we had chemicals sitting there ready to shoot into a tube, and we couldn't do anything about it. So from a supplier, from a manufacturer's perspective, what has the supply chain done for you guys? I mean, what are you seeing?
I mean, so first of all, we've all gotten really good at whack-a-mole. Like that's every Monday morning we sit around a table and it's whack-a-mole. So 1 week it's tubes, 1 week and the theme of the year has been you just can't make this up. Like it's just not something that you could have ever even dreamed of. So from the Texas storms, and then the resins and paint category, it's even worse, but from the Texas storms and all that, to last week or 2 weeks ago, one of our raw materials was down for a week because of electricity outage. Like just think, like all of this stuff is piling up. And so what it's meant is a few things. So we are a just-in-time, very lean manufacturing company, and we've had to do some risk buys or some, you know, when it's available, buy more, which we don't like, but we're doing it. The biggest change that I think will stick around is dual sourcing. And so this ability to have systems and capabilities behind backup sourcing. So redundancies, yeah. And as well, making sure that we are able to plan ahead on allocations for customers. So no longer can it be demand pulls what we give you. We have to look at what did you buy last year and have a system in place and leverage our sales team to spend time, instead of selling, working on administrative work, working on allocations, which we never had to do before. So those two skills have, by necessity, been something that we worked on this last year. So what that has meant, and what you might see across a lot of manufacturers, is we're so busy focusing on resourcing that we haven't been able to put our R&D team into the field of new innovation. So my hunch is you'll see maybe a slowdown of innovation from manufacturers for the next year or two, because we've been so busy just trying to get you what we already make. So.
Yeah, I know that's one thing that we've talked a lot with retailers about. kind of some of the downstream effects of everything that's been taking place is retailers feel the same. They've felt that we've been so focused on bringing in replenishment products that we haven't focused a lot on diving into what new products and new SKUs. And then you add to that the fact that, we've gone almost the better part of 2 years where we haven't really had a lot of live markets. We haven't had shows like this, so discovery's kind of slowed down. So we're all kind of curious to see what that's going to mean for kind of new product rollouts moving forward.
And I would just echo the conversation. It's not just supply chain disruption. It is also demand versus where we were before. So what people want in the industry, even if I had 100% of my raw materials when I needed them that I had last year, I will not be whole because the demand is 20% higher. So, you work a lot with the Farnsworth Group and all these insights industries. Every metric you could look at, and we dig in left and right, tells us that we're going to continue to have shortages, not necessarily based on supply chain, but just based on the gap between demand and availability of products, because the demand is that much higher into the next 5 years at least.
Well, right, and I don't want to give away the presentation we're having tomorrow about state of the industry, but what we saw was 2020 was 23% up over 2019, and through the first 6 months of 2021, we're 7.5% up over 2020. And so, between those, you're talking about 30%, that's usually not a digestible increase in demand. Could you guys talk to us a little bit, kind of specifically about each of your organizations and what you guys have done to try and help mitigate some of the challenges that the supply chain issues have brought about? Jeff, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, as a distributor, the best thing we can do is get product, right? So, we're in heavy negotiations to make sure we're getting as much product that is out there that we, should have access to. And obviously, we've taken a really robust inventory position on products. The interesting thing about the demand is, usually as a distributor, we can track, I could go the last 5 years and track demand almost like clockwork. The interesting thing about the demand now is there is hoarding going on, meaning, oh, you now have that, I better buy 4 months supply because I'm not sure when you're going to have it again.
How do you use that?
That's compounding some of the challenges for everybody along the supply chain is, what is the true demand of it? So I think the key, though, is communication. We've invested a lot in our procurement team. The days of cut a PO and the product's going to be there in 2 weeks and it's going to be there, those are long gone. I mean, our procurement team now probably spends, taking a guess here, but probably at least half their time in communication with vendors going, where's the problem, when's it going to be here, so we can then communicate back to the customer. I think that's very important. We're also working on more technology to make everything transparent and visible to the customer. So right now you can log on, we'll tell you where the inventory's at, what's on order, when it's supposed to come in, and just communicate. I always say people just want an answer. It may not be a good answer, but they want the right, accurate answer. Yeah. And we think along the supply chain that should really be a goal, that we're getting that clear answer to the retailer so they can tell the customer exactly what's going on.
Fantastic. Paul, I know you guys have done a lot, so...
Yeah, there's been maturity, right? So I was kind of laughing myself here thinking about where we were 18 months ago, and it was for about a month we were in denial. Right, so we didn't really have a coordinated approach to it. We thought COVID was fleeting. We thought these 100% increases in demand for long-handled tools, that can't persist, right? And when it became apparent that this was going to be here to stay, we shifted, I think, more to what I would characterize as a transactional approach to it. And this is kind of what Charlotte was describing as every week there's a new fire to put out. We started to form SWAT teams to go after various problems, but we really weren't approaching it in sort of a strategic way. And I think more recently, a real focus on sales and operations planning, right at its core. Those are muscles that an organization has to have if they're going to be able to manage through this. Being able to forecast and understand demand down to the micro level is essential. these days. A lot of it is still guesswork, but that's key. I think the other piece, and both my co-panelists mentioned this, is thinking about this as a company problem, not a supply chain problem. So some of the choices that you make do impact cash flow, right? So when you talk about premium payments for ocean freight carriers, these are big investments that you're making, and a gamble, right? Well, paying a premium payment doesn't mean you're going to get the sea container on time. So the CFO's got to be at the table. The head merchant's got to be at the table, because to Charlotte's point, we may need to shrink the offering to be able to manage through that. And then I think the last piece is how you approach your procurement strategy, right? And being more deliberate about that. My guess would be, like our company, with as it is with most companies, a lot of our purchases are concentrated on a small number of vendors, and that's where you need to focus, right? To make sure that you have good sort of operational synchronization between the two, and demand planning synchronization between the two parties. We've heard that time and time again from our vendors, that the weekly forecasts that we provide them, albeit imperfect, are essential for them to be able to plan their operations, and then just making sure that we're not getting in the way, right? If a vendor has a preference for us placing orders on Monday versus Wednesday, let's place the orders on Wednesday. So I think there's a whole host of small things that you can do to kind of get beyond it. Never going to be perfect, but there is a lot that you can control.
Excellent. Charlotte?
I would echo, transparency has been huge, and I would add to that and say just respect and being nice has gone a long way for Satchco. We're small.
That's impossible.
I know. We're not one of the big players in our industry, and so we've been able to punch above our weight just by sheer virtue of relationship we have with our suppliers, and understanding they're dealing with the same hot mess that we are, and so being respectful, being nice has actually led to us getting a little more than our fair share, which doesn't suck right now. So we're on shelves, so never forget that. The other is being downright scrappy. So our sourcing guy has rented a truck to go pick up resins or pigments or things whenever, the ships are stuck or the trucks are stuck or whatever that looks like. So we're not afraid to say, well, normally my hat is this, but today I'm going to go do this.
I'm going to be a truck driver, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And then I would echo that allocation and supply chain sourcing no longer is reactive, it's become proactive. So as we look at our agenda for 2022, and we have a new leader of R&D, the number one initiative we have for him is to go and dual, triple, quadruple source every raw material that we make, wherever possible. And that is now, even if it's not in trouble, we're just going to plan for it to be in trouble one day. And that's something we hadn't had to do before. So that is all stuff that we're managing through daily.
Excellent. Well, let me ask you, one of the things that's, with all the conversations I have with retailers, things stick out to me. And one of the things, a comment that a retailer made as part of one of the groups we moderate, we were asking them how their behavior has changed over that past 18 months. And what he said, again, I've quoted multiple times, is he said, we've become better buyers than we ever have been. And a lot of that's, kind of what you're saying. They've had to get scrappy, and they've had to look for, where can I get this, and where can I get this, and where can I get this? What are some of the changes that you guys are seeing your customers making? Your customers, your members, the retail side, what are the changes that you guys are kind of feeling in how they want to source? I mean, I'll also add to that our research shows us right now that retailers are carrying about 10% more inventory than they typically do. I think that was the number at the end of 2020. I think it's probably higher than that as we're going into 2021, because that's a behavior that seems to change. Is if I can find something, I'm going to buy it. I'm going to hold on to it because I know I'm going to need it. So what are you guys seeing as far as your customer behaviors changing?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. All right. You come this way. It's a great question. Obviously, being a distributor, we do see more business going through distribution that normally would have went direct. The pandemic has been a challenge both for the manufacturer that's selling directly to the dealer and for the dealer to go, where do I now get all these products that I'm getting asked for that I wasn't getting asked for pre-pandemic? So we do see dealers buying a much broader spectrum of products. Again, if you can't get A, I'm going to offer my customer B and C. And I must say, we're really impressed with how quickly the dealer base, pretty much of all sizes, have responded to this to get their product, their customer the product they need. We've also seen a big interest in online business.
Okay.
We see a lot more dealers saying, how do we get online? The buy online, ship to store model seems to be gaining a lot of momentum in our channel. And I think that really speaks to, in our opinion, the future, which is speed to market. I mean, that's what's really changed is how the consumer buys. Right. I do think a lot of what we're dealing with will go back to normal at some point, but I think what will probably change forever is the way the end consumer now, how they want to get their product, how quickly they want to get their product. And then our challenge along the chain is, can we keep up with that speed of demand?
Yep. I'd echo some of that. I think it's been surprising for me to see how willing many of our customers are to sort of relax brand preferences maybe that they've been really passionate about
right.
in the past. How they will look past price if availability is there. So maybe a 7 or 8% price increase or price difference just doesn't matter anymore if you've got the product on the shelf. And then I think there's, I don't know if it's loyalty is the right word, or maybe just more of a willingness to go out and look for alternate vendors. As a company, we've lost some customers because of availability. I'd say that the silver lining to that is we've picked up far more than we've lost, but it does feel like there's more of a tendency or a willingness to look for alternatives and to maybe even jump ship. I think for those of us that are in the sort of small format hardware business that we are, the other thing that we're seeing is sort of a consumer preference to that small store format, sure. Right? You're seeing that. You shared some numbers on market share with the big boxes relative to the independents. Last couple of years, the independents have kind of reversed the trend. So I think that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues and what that will mean to the assortments that we need to sell, or the way we go about serving those consumers. What Jeff mentioned about the buy online, pick up in store. Some of the small independents aren't always all that technologically savvy. If they're going to have a meaningful inroad into big box, they need to offer some of the same sort of conveniences that you can get at the big box outlets.
And we've definitely seen in some of our research the acceleration of the desire on the part of independents to become more e-commerce friendly.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
One of the biggest jumps we've seen is in the offering of curbside pickup. It was amazing. We did research early on in the pandemic, and within 3 or 4 months of the onset of the pandemic in earnest, something like 76% of the independent retailers we talked to had implemented some form of curbside pickup, and a lot of it was ad hoc. Call into the store and I'll write the order down and we'll just have someone bring it out to you when you get there. But that's one of those things that seems to have that kind of sticking power. And now hopefully there'll be the ability to move it from that kind of all hands on deck, let's just get it done, to a more sophisticated model of delivering on those sorts of things. Charlotte, I want to ask you guys because, and I'm going to point out even before you answer, something you guys did that was really interesting that really speaks to something that both Jeff and Paul brought up, was you guys had come out with some marketing materials for retailers not too long ago that was really trying to help the customer understand, if you're used to buying this, and it's not available, here are other products. And it wasn't just specific to Sashco products, it was specific to caulks and sealants in general. Here are other alternatives for you. So you guys were really proactive in trying to in understanding, but also trying to help that decision tree of, hey, you might used to be buying brand X. That might be the brand you would normally know, but if that's not available, here's what else you can do that'll work.
Right. I think independents have a pretty big opportunity to take share right now. It's already happening, but exactly through that thought leadership. So you're able to train your staff to answer those questions in a way that the Lowe's and the Home Depot just don't have people that
Sure.
are expert like that. So wherever you can, push back to your suppliers to give you that information so that they understand. Pros, historically, they like the product their dad used, right? And they don't think that much about it. So now that they're having to try new things, there are certain categories, sealants are one of them, where you have to understand a little bit about the technology to know if it's going to work in certain situations. And if you have your staff available and ready to answer those questions and recommend swaps and say, look, I know you can't find XYZ brand, but this technology is what you need for this job. Here's the available options within that technology. Then you're helping them make a purchase in a situation where maybe they might have been unsure or not able to move forward. I would also say that being an independent, you probably, I would assume, have more flexibility in your assortment and how you buy than the big box. So I would be looking at a few things. I would consider more frequent line reviews, making sure that you're maybe quarterly allowing for, hey, I normally stock this, but instead I'm going to bring this in, if you want it to be systemized and formal. Or working with your manufacturers and saying, look, what do you have available right now, and keeping a spot open on your shelf that you know is going to be for whatever's available. So it might be duplicative to what's in line, it might not be, it might be a vendor you've never brought in, but you're just going to have this spot and someone in charge of buying for this spot that's very opportunist right now. And so what can I get, what can I fill the spot with? And thinking like that in a very flexible way, that's something that the independent stores can do that the big box, they just have too much red tape. They can't do that right now. So.
Absolutely. One of the things that I want to ask you guys next is, it seems like, and you've all mentioned it, the challenges to the supply chain have changed since we started this. I mean, it's almost like we need a supply chain bingo thing, and then for power outages and ice storms and Godzilla attacks and things like that. But early on, and it still persists, raw materials were more of an issue. Now it seems kind of the thing that everybody's discussing is the congestion at the ports. And we've taken federal action here to try and relieve that by increasing the hours that the ports are going to be open and processing. Some companies out there, like Home Depot, went so far as to contract with their own, kind of freighter to have their own ship, but I was on we're watching a panel of people from the ports, and they said, well, that's, so they have their own ship that'll now be sitting in port with 150 others waiting to be offloaded. So what do you guys see right now as kind of the biggest supply chain challenge, either right now or what might be kind of around that corner that's just starting to kind of like, pop up? Charlotte, we'll start with you. Yeah, we'll go the other way.
I think you forgot a leg of that. So there's three legs. One is the raw materials. One is getting it to you. The third is labor. Labor is killing us. We just put in place, we've raised our base salaries. We offer full benefits. We're a great place to work. I mean, I'm biased, but we're pretty fun people. We cannot get people in our factory. So we've put in place premiums to try to get people and recruit them for the next several months so that we can get through some of this. So for us right now, that's the sharpest sword. Like, that is what we cannot find a solution to. And if you look around, I don't know if you're aware, but the minimum wage at McDonald's, at Amazon, is anywhere between $18 and $20 right now. So even now that the restrictions or the money that people were getting, to stay at home, whatever, for support during COVID is gone, we thought for sure that would solve it. That's gone. Now we'll find people. Not happening.
Yeah. One of the things interesting I heard about that was some people that said, we're going to wait to see what we do with our wages till the enhanced unemployment benefits go away. But what they found was, as soon as that happened, other companies kind of leapt to the front and say, oh, we're going to go with $22. So it was like, well, we waited, but we're right where we would have been anyway. So. And
the big players like Amazon can afford to keep going up, but what you're going to find is that hurts other players in ways that we can't keep going up without the price increases, which I know none of you want to hear. So, yeah.
Well, Amazon can apparently afford spaceships and stuff like that too. So, Paul, we'll come back going this way.
I think Charlotte is spot on in talking about this, in terms of all the links in the chain. I mean, if there's going to be recovery or healing, it's not going to be about just one of those links in the chain being fixed. It's got to be broad-based. And right now, the healing is very uneven, right? So people, big component. People are a big part of the supply chain. For us, we're really struggling with ocean freight, right? Oh. There's just not enough capacity out there. Before we started the panel discussion, I was mentioning to Jeff, I read an article. Last year, the ocean freight industry generated about $10 billion in profits. This year, they're on pace to do $100 billion. So there's going to be some feet dragging, I think, to want to build, capacity back into ocean freight quickly, right? There's a lot of profiteering going on right now. Before I came to the show this morning, I got on the phone with a customer. I was getting an earful about a tractor trailer not showing up for now. We're a month into a delay. This country's got, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 80,000 truck drivers. We should have 120,000. That's going to take time to fix itself. I think probably the brightest spot is just production, right? Making products. It seems like that piece of the equation has come back online. It's, again, I'll go back to the statement I made earlier. Part of the issue is production doesn't occur where consumption occurs, and those two things need to come closer together, I think, to have long-term impact.
Speaking to that, and I'll just ask you guys as you're answering maybe to touch on this, is that same panel that I was watching about the logistics, someone had asked, when is container pricing going to go down? And they said, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but several years ago it was about $4,500, $3,500 a container. Now it's up into the low 20s, and every person on the panel agreed. It's not. It might come down to the high teens, but you're not going to see it anytime in the near future getting back to that $4,000, $5,000 container. Ultimately, and that's just one factor. We all see some of the other factors pulling into the gas station. Gas is continuing to go up. Where are prices going?
Well, I think that is going to be one of our biggest challenges. Back up real quick. I really can't add a whole lot to what they already said, but speaking on the paint channel, I do think this whole resin issue and so forth is probably going to be one of the first things to get fixed, if you will. And I think that demand's still going to continue. We are seeing the demand move from DIY more to the pro side of the business. So I think that demand is going to be pretty strong. I do think our biggest challenge is going to be this transportation congestion, the inflation, and then what is that going to have on the economy, which then what happens to that pro demand, right? Because as we all know, that can flip pretty quickly at the rate we're going. So.
Yeah. Well, let me, and it's hard to believe we're already in about 5 minutes left here, guys, because we could talk about this for a long time. But let me end with the $497 billion question of each one of you guys. I said this is being filmed, so we're all going on record. When is this going to be over with? When are things going to be normal again? Give us a date. But no, seriously, in your best estimation, when do you see things normalizing, or can we just not tell right now?
How do we roll the dice? No, based on the conversations we've had with, our major vendors and so forth, the standard answer is probably middle of next year. But as you see some of these issues coming up with supply chain containers, I look and go, how that can be resolved in 9 months is beyond me. But, hopefully it is middle of next year. Maybe it may take all of next year. But I like I said earlier, it will go back to normal. At some point.
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball, but I do believe in the wisdom of the crowd. So I'm going to lean on a survey that Cleveland Research did recently. It was a pretty sizable survey of vendors, so producers, and the thinking was healing by the end of the year. I just think that is woefully optimistic. So that was 20%, 60% within the first half of next year, maybe, and then 20% after July. I think that's probably closer to reality. Based on everything that I've read, it seems like things are measured in years, right? It's going to take years for ocean freight capacity to come online, years to get another 40, 50,000 truck drivers in the United States. The only caveat to that, and Jeff, you just alluded to it, is if something triggers a fall off in demand. So recession, right? We get something that happens to the stock market, shakes consumer confidence, demand pulls back. That will give some breathing room for the supply chain to kind of reestablish itself. I don't want that to happen, and that's why your question about pricing is so important. That could trigger it as well. But I think when you see the White House and Joe Biden taking an interest in this, that's meaningful, right? That this is something that deep thinkers worry about impacting the ability of the U.S. to grow. Used to be growth was governed by demand. At least most of my life, that seemed to be the case. Now growth seems to be governed by what you can produce. It's governed by supply. So there's been an inversion there. But I don't know.
Yeah, no doubt that the gravity of the issue is not falling on deaf ears at really any place right now. I think they all understand the potential impact to the economy as large. Charlotte, bring us home.
We're aligned that from a raw material and production perspective, we feel like maybe mid next summer. Where I think it's going to take a lot longer is the labor shortage. I don't think that's going to fix itself right away. It's certainly going to have an impact on price. And I also think that the demand is going to continue to grow at a pace that even if production was full capacity, we'll see gap in production versus demand into the next several years, and that has nothing to do with, that we don't have people producing. It's that they just can't keep pace with the demand. So I think you'll continue to see that lag for several years.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much. A lot to unpack here in just 45 minutes. I'll real quick, does anybody in the crowd have any questions? I don't see anybody reaching for tomatoes, but any questions? I'm sorry? Do you think the question is...
We are 100% American produced. We were made in Colorado, and it is nice that we didn't have to wait on shipping across the seas. So I'll say that. We do buy from people who source from overseas, so sometimes that impacts us, but it has been beneficial to us versus our competitors that we produce in-house.
And Paul or Jeff, I think one of you guys started talking about kind of Paul, I think it was maybe about the onshoring movement, but there are also challenges there, and one of the main challenges there is something that Charlotte mentioned is labor and wages, and the ability to keep pace with labor and wages, and then the ability to produce and acquire the equipment needed for production that had been, so do you guys see this kind of continuing a momentum for onshoring?
I do, right? Yeah, we're seeing that. I think it will be more. It'll be slower for lower value goods, lower margin goods, for more complex things that we sell. I think you're definitely going to see some of our biggest suppliers have been down this path for the last decade, really bringing production back to the States.
Another quote, I was talking to a vendor and they made a statement that they do source a lot of things overseas, and they said, literally right now, if all of our customers said, we will pay whatever premium you want to move that production to the United States, they said it would take us 18 to 24 months to even be able to ramp up to do that. Challenges in that area as well.
That's right.
Jeff, anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I think is everybody looks back and goes, how do you mitigate this if we come into similar circumstances in the future? I think a lot of that is going to drive stuff to be done domestically. Right. I do, and I think there's a desire for things to move that way. And I think as we look back and go, well, how do we work together as manufacturers, distributors, retailers? It's going to be us that's going to drive that also, not just the consumer. But I think that's a very positive thing, and I think it's going to have some legs. So.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, yes.
So as far as onshoring, what role does some of the upgrade ability in terms of China
I honestly can't even speak to that because we are solely made, and almost all of our raw materials are in the U.S. So maybe
you
if you
could
guys have some
probably-
vendors.
Yeah, I think the interesting piece, and we deal with this frequently. Again, we bring in hundreds or even thousands of sea containers a year, and Dan was mentioning the sort of baseline costs of sea containers. Just to get on top of that, just to get head-of-line privileges, you have to pay premium payments on top of that if you want to get your Christmas trees in time. There's going to be a sort of consequence to that, which is going to trigger another consumer behavior, right? There was an article in the Wall Street Journal about a month ago, the price of artificial Christmas trees rising 25%. That's because there's a urgency to get those products in. To meet that urgency, you have to pay the premiums. Once you pay the premiums, if you want to make a profit, you got to raise your prices. So that's going to cause yet another shift in consumer behavior. People are going to say, maybe I don't need an artificial Christmas tree, maybe I'll go cut one down. So it's kind of a silly example, but I think there will be a point, depending upon the product, where consumers start to think either A, I can do without, or B, there's a substitute product that is just as
And
good.
there's no longer a price advantage, right?
And there's no longer a price advantage, right?
It's weird the way Christmas trees, like right around January 1st, the price just drops out of that for some reason.
Maybe we need to move Christmas.
Chris, there you go, just move Christmas, that'll do it.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Talked about the onshore production capacity that itself sounds inflationary. So, I mean, you would expect that to cap on demand?
You know, that's why I think it has to be selective, right? U.S. manufacturing still has a long way to go in terms of automation and productivity enhancement. A lot of that improvement has happened with automakers, aerospace manufacturers, the big boys. A lot of small manufacturers, there's still a lot of manual work associated with production. That's going to change. You're seeing a lot of small manufacturers adopt cobots and other sort of robot helpers to lower cost of production. And so I think where you'll see it first again is high value goods, right? So a combination of there's margin to work with there's some technological complexity there, and the product just lends itself to automation. That's where you'll see it first.
Thank you. All right, folks, thank you so much again for a lot to unpack there, guys. And thank you for, just to say, everybody, I've joked a couple of times about throwing tomatoes and stuff, but everybody knows every link of the chain is working so hard. It's not in anybody's best interest to have the chaos we have right now. And we have really seen over the last 18 months, for all the stories of the challenges, we've really seen distributors, manufacturers, and certainly retailers step up to meet their community needs. And you guys are up, late nights, burning the oil, trying to figure out how to solve this. And we really appreciate the hard work that the entire channel has done. So thank you guys for keeping fighting that fight. So
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that was good.